Hello again. So today I want to talk about RPG tanks. Now, what do I mean by this? I don't mean armored vehicles for transporting troops around or doing battle with, although I'm sure there are role playing games which use those. I'm talking about the heavily armored man. It is a fan based, or not necessarily fan based, but player based term which has become pretty much standard in the RPG industry. The idea is you got a guy, he's got heavy armor, so he's hard to hit or hard to do damage to. Potentially high health to back that up because he is going to get hit eventually from time to time. And the idea is you use him, charge him forward, make the enemy attack him, while the other people do their thing from the back. And when I say do their thing, and that's what I want to get into, is this, it's a legitimate game element, except so many people who want to make the tank character and play the tank character do so badly, in my opinion. And I'm going to explain why. I am also going to compare RPG tanks to actual tanks a little bit. Now, I'm not an expert on armor or on tanks, but if we're going to name something after a tank, then let's look at it as such. As well as most people who want to play tanks aren't experts on armor and tanks either, so I've got that much on them at least. Seen a few videos of people who are experts on armor and tanks, so I at least have that leg up. I won't get everything correct, but I do have at least have some legitimate sources to back me up on some stuff. So, where to start? I mean, the biggest problem is, in my opinion here, tanks, military vehicles are basically a team effort. It takes more than one person to operate them effectively. Some of them take more than two people. Whereas your RPG player who wants to just, my heavily armored man tends to not be a team player. Tends to be, wants to be in the spotlight. It's all about me. I've created this character which only does one thing effectively, and therefore I'm going to try to steer the game that direction. Not all people do this, but I would say when people are talking, I want to be a tank player, 50% chance they're going to. That's been my experience. So yeah, this is all I can do. I can run forward, I can hit things, I can take damage. Or I can take hits. Because again, got the armor class, you gotta roll to see if you actually hit me or not. Or the attacker does. Technically, the way armor works in role-playing games is it's not whether you're hit or not, it's whether the hit is effective. Because, I'm a man wearing armor. I'm a bigger target, actually. But whatever you throw at me isn't going to get through the armor, so I'm safe. Even if it does hit. And that's what armor's all about, basically. Arrows can go through armor. Everyone, a lot of people say no, they can't. Yes, they can. It's rare because they have to hit almost perpendicular. Anything else, that's what armor does, is it deflects more than it protects, or more than blocks. So something hits perpendicular, it might go through. Something hits at an angle, it's going to glance off probably. And that goes for almost any weapon. Your blade hits. You can potentially cut through with a well enough designed sword. You can potentially cut through. You're hitting a thin piece of metal, because armor generally was thin, with a wedge. And if you hit it close to perpendicular, you can potentially crack it or break through. I mean, you can punch holes through metal. If you hit at an angle, probably going to slide off. Now, other weapons, war hammers, those are designed to do blunt damage. So again, you've got the armor, it's going to spread it out over the surface of the armor, so you're not being hit in one spot, but you're going to feel it more. It is possible to break someone's arm or leg or something if you hit them with a heavy enough object on a plate of armor, just because the force will do that. They've still got some protection because it is spreading the force out some. So armor itself isn't an absolute protection. And that's what tanks want to believe it is. And games don't always cover this, which is one thing I don't like about games. Just in some point, or I don't like about the heavily armored character in games, is that they don't recognize that armor isn't as perfect as the game makes it out to be. So it takes 2 people or more to run a tank. In a game, you can generally do 2 actions, a move action and a combat action. This is when you get into combat, you're breaking things down into actions and rounds. So I can walk up to someone and then I can swing my sword at them. The tank, actual military tank, it can drive up to something and it can do a military action. If it's got 2 people in it. If it's got 1 person in it, I can drive up. Now I've got to get out of my seat and go and operate the turret or whatever. So 1 person cannot operate a tank as 2 people would. In fact, I could argue we would only get 2 actions per every 3 rounds because you're in a cramped space and you got to move around. Now, RPGs, they are not going to penalize players up to that point, but there should still be some sort of penalty if we want to compare them to tanks. Now they do take a movement penalty to some extent. Heavier armor, you move slower. That helps some. That said, the tank player always wants to charge. And they want to complain. Charging is generally you get to move you can move twice your normal distance, and you can hit with a bonus to your hit because you got your momentum behind you. So they always want to do that. They want to complain if anyone gets in their charge lane. You step in front because the charge has to be a straight line, and you can't be obstacles in the way. So if I want to shoot someone with my bow and I step into the tank's charge lane, they're going to have a fit 9 times out of 10. Why? Because I'm blocking their action and they want to be in the spotlight. Like I said, that's the big problem. Is 50% of all tank players want to be in the spotlight. So there's that. There is limited vision in both armor and tanks. The whole purpose of a tank is you want to be surrounded by deflective metal. Same with armor. So armor, I do have some experience wearing different helmets. I have been able to try some. Now we got some, just the basic cap's not going to be a problem. When we start to get into the kind that got the arch over the eye, so you got the nose piece there, it starts to block your vision a little bit. Not a whole lot. When you got the full helmet, you've pretty much got tunnel vision. So the idea that I can go up with 3 people around me, swinging my sword and hitting all of them effectively and being defending against all of them as effectively, it doesn't work. Now again, it would take a whole rules rewrite to make that reflect more reality. And the same goes, like I said, military tanks. Some of them were designed with a periscope of some sort. Others were designed with out, and you just had little slits to look through. Most of them had some sort of gun port, so you could have people with rifles inside. And you could use it as a troop transport as much as anything else. And Some of them, they had the hatch, which they usually kept. You see them in parade or whatever, or the hatch will be open and someone will be sitting there looking out or whatever. During battle, they don't do that. They stay inside and keep the hatch shut. Terrible thing if a grenade were to go into an open hatch during battle. So you're very limited vision. In fact, in most cases, or in some cases, I should say, probably not, if you had a tank platoon or a tank squad or whatever, they would often have a spotter who would sit out of range of the enemy, not in a tank. They got their binoculars or searching things out, and they're radioing various people, 15 degrees to your left or whatever, because the guys in the tank can't see as well. So in some cases, they would actually have spotters who actually kept in contact with them with radio just so they could be more effective. You can't do that with a guy in armor and a helmet on. So tanks are actually, real tanks are actually very much team efforts. Whereas, like I said, the RPG tank, 50% of them want to be the star of the show. They start to tell you how to play your character. Don't get in my charge lane. That one's sort of understandable. If you got a one-trick pony, then let him do his one trick. But then you start to get into things like, your job is to heal me. I've heard people tell other players that, someone's playing the cleric, they've got the healing ability. Your job is just to heal me, because even as a tank, I am going to take some damage. So you just stand there and cast your healing spells on me. Don't do, It's gotten to the point where I know people who don't want to play clerics or any kind of healer, just because that's the expected thing that comes. Is your job is to be my butler, basically. Do what I tell you to. Yes, it is for the good of the entire group up to a point, but the game's no fun if I don't get to make my own decisions from time to time. So, like I said, I know people who don't want to play clerics, or what's coming out more is people playing the battle cleric. That you can design a cleric which, I worship the god of war, therefore I'm a warrior. I don't do healing, or I only heal myself. I know people who do that, and it's also sort of a jerk move, but at the same time it's understandable because other players force them into. You have to either refuse to be the healer, or you are just the team healer and that's all you do. And so I guess if it's fun for you to refuse to be the healer, I would support that more than living up to everyone else's expectations and doing only what they tell you to. Play your character as you would play your character. And that is, the big, well, this is what my character would do argument that people want to make. And yes, that is an effective argument, but fine, my character wouldn't hang out with you, or my character wouldn't support your decision to do that. That's also a legitimate response. Okay, so hard to see. Now they do have, I will say, they do have proficiency. Most RPGs, if you are playing a fighter class and you are proficient with this armor, so you take less penalties with it, or you're proficient with these weapons, or so there are, depending on what class you play, and usually a tank is a fighter or martial class of some sort, fighter, paladin, cavalier. So you are going to be proficient with your armor, but again, the game, even being proficient with your armor, it's not an absolute 100% bonus. It's still slows you down some, still has other penalties it'll add to you. And some games try to write these penalties in. Usually it's a generic, you're taking a -2 to certain rolls. It's not as, because some of these penalties would come up in combat, which they don't put it in combat. It's you take -2 to skill checks, but not to combat checks because you're proficient with your armor. When in reality, armor does slow you down a little bit, somewhat. Now, several people have done videos, and several people who understand armor have done videos saying armor is not as big a penalty as most people imagine. There is a myth that if you fall on your back, you cannot get up in armor. That is not true. You cannot get on a horse with armor. That is also not true. That said, other things which are legitimate with armor, players want to ignore, even though there aren't often rules for them. It takes time to put armor on. So we have people, well, I'm going to sleep in my armor. Okay, well, then most game systems, you take a penalty. You didn't get a good night's sleep, so you're taking a penalty the rest of the next day because you're partly tired. So they want to dodge around that issue as much as possible. If the game master doesn't ask me if I'm taking my armor off when we go to camp, I'm not going to say yes or no. I'm going to leave it on. If he specifically asks, then I'm expecting an attack, so I'll leave it on and I'll take watch and hope I'm at watch when the attack comes. If he doesn't ask and there is an attack at night, I'm going to claim I'm wearing my armor, and I will take the penalty the next day. If he doesn't ask, then I'll just claim I didn't wear my armor, and I won't take the penalty. It's very much up to trying to guess what's coming and lie to fit your character's best interest. Which, I don't like my characters to die, but I'm not going to lie for them to survive. Good gameplay, be honest. So there's that. So like I said, there are actual rules to stuff like armor. Armor never gets damaged for some reason. There are rules for damaging armor, but it's like you would be taking extra dice rolls every turn, and it would slow the game down. So most game masters don't play with it or with them unless they're really trying to penalize a character, which is frowned upon, even though sometimes it's deserved. So damaging armor, basically, it protected me from the sword, but it still took a dent because armor's generally fairly thin metal. 1/8 of an inch is sort of thick, maybe 1/16 of an inch closer to the truth. Never actually measured any, but from what I've seen, it's probably around 1/16 of an inch thick, most of it. Shields might be thicker. Easier to carry, So the penalty for actually, paying to repair your armor should be a thing in more games. Buying armor shouldn't be as easy. I mean, most armor, the people I know, the videos I've seen of people who know a lot about armor, most of them have their suit of armor, and they'll talk about it, and it takes months to make, because they are making something that's going to fit them. Buying armor off the rack, you're probably going to take a lot of penalties because it's going to fit, not going to fit very well. And everything that people, yes, you can wear armor and get on a horse if it fits properly. If it doesn't fit properly, you might have trouble getting on your horse. That's something I think most people who know about armor and laugh at the people who say, oh, armor was too cumbersome to do anything with, they would agree that it does have to be made for you. You can't just buy it off the rack and hope it fits well. And they would agree that, yes, it's harder if it doesn't fit perfect or doesn't fit well, not designed for you, you are going to take penalties to certain movements. Now, of course, again, the games can't make these rules. Well, the games could make rules, but it would slow the game down a lot. So they aren't going to try to make rules for all of that. Now, we were talking about spotters and all that other stuff. One thing, tanks are generally ranged weapons. It is possible to ram stuff with a tank, to run over stuff. You can do a lot of damage, but they're not really designed for that. They're designed to shoot from a distance. To some extent, they're used to intimidate the enemy if possible, which, again, is a thing in most games, but most players don't want to take the time to put intimidation into their character build. It's I'm going to tank all my stuff into hitting hard and buying heavy armor so I don't get hit, and anything that'll raise my health, including yelling at other players to heal me. So, and that's where we start to get into, well, to make my strength higher so I can hit better, or to make my constitution higher. Those are the important things, constitution and strength with a tank player. And so we will start to have people doing stuff like, well, I'm going to just tank my intelligence score so I can raise my strength score. You get so many points to invest into your game stats. And so people do so, and you can gain extra points in some stats by taking penalties to others. So players will tank their intelligence, their charisma, their wisdom in order to get higher strength, higher fortitude, or constitution. And by so doing, they are making their character more of a one-trick pony. And therefore they are dragging down the rest of the group. And that's where we get into ego. Now, actual tanks, when they first came out, they were sort of a special thing. And any new weapon, any good weapon, there's going to be some ego involved. I was chosen for this. Why? Well, we hope this is a superior weapon, so we want our better men to have it, so they can defend it. It won't fall into the hands of the enemy. In case of a tank, you need more knowledge. You want everything that a normal infantryman knows. Then you also have to know how to drive the tank. You have to know how to do field repairs because yes, we have mechanics to fix them, but if they break down on the battlefield, we want you to be able to fix as much as possible. So it does take more skills to be in a tank division or squad, or different armies have different categories for them. So to some extent, they aren't considered elite for most, but they are considered sort of higher. Don't know what the term to use here. I keep wanting to say quality. That's not the right word. Status. Let's say. They aren't necessarily considered elite weapons, but there is a higher status to driving a tank because it takes a greater knowledge. They're trusting you with a more expensive piece of equipment, all sorts of stuff like that. And so there is a little bit of ego that goes with being a tank operator in real life. And there is, like I said, a lot of ego for about 50% of the players playing tank characters. Like I said, they expect, you can't do a stealth check well in armor, as it should be. That said, we're never going to use stealth. Wait a second, I like rogue characters. How about if I go ahead and I scout things out? We know something's up ahead. I'm just going to use stealth check, move up there. And I build stealthy rogues, practically invisible, even without invisibility spells. I like stealth. Nope, nobody wants to trust me. I'm going with you because you might accidentally start a fight and then I'll be far away and my armor slows me down and it'll take me 3 rounds to get up there. So I'm going with you. No, let me do my thing. I built a good character. I know how to build a character who's more than just a one-trick pony. Trust me to go out there, come back without alerting the enemy. Nope, not going to trust you. Climb checks. You can climb wearing armor. You generally need a rope to do so. Most people who play tank characters don't buy rope. They expect the other characters to. Again, my rogue can climb without a rope. He doesn't need to buy one. Your tank needs a rope to climb. He should buy his own. Don't expect me to spend my gold on a rope. But no, most tank players, they expect other people to provide what they need to do non-tank stuff. And so again, they want to, can we try to talk our way through this? No, I want to fight our way through because that's all I do. That's all my character was designed to do, was to fight. And again, this we go back, if you want to compare this to military tanks, actual weapons, used in combat. If you had that attitude, you would probably be court-martialed. You're following orders, and if they say you stay behind this line until this group does their thing, you stay behind that line until that group does their thing. If you want to whine and complain and ruin the morale of the whole thing, claiming you're better than everyone else, it's not going to go over well for you in the long run. That's it. Like I said, it's not a bad game concept. It's just most people do it poorly. Or half the people at least, let's say. And I always regret, group forming and someone says, I want to be the tank. It's always the tank. There can never be more than one frontline fighter in their opinion. I know I'm going to regret the game. So that's it. Don't be a jerk when you play your RPGs. Have a nice day.